Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. This is a special retrospective episode on the legendary Jerry Hay. Jerry Hay is without a doubt one of the most impactful trumpet players of modern times. He's contributed his dazzling trumpet work and arranging wizardry to a monumental number of recordings over his 45 plus years in the LA studio scene. And in this episode, I'll be pulling some clips from my hangs with Jerry, as well as from some of the other trumpet gurus that have felt his influence. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. Hi, and welcome to this special edition of the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. And before we get started, I need to make a little confession. A lot of you have been commenting on how much you enjoy this series and how the show has provided you with equal parts of inspiration, education, and of course, entertainment. And as much as I love knowing all of the work that my team and I put into bringing you a new episode every week, that it's being appreciated, I do need you to understand that the person that I'm really doing this all for, me. I love to talk about trumpet. I love to talk about what it takes to be successful in anything, how to overcome your obstacles, how to ultimately live your dream. And through this podcast, I've had the opportunity to reconnect with some of my old friends and make some new ones along the way. And one of the new friends that I've made just happens to also be the second major influence on me as a trumpet player. The first was Maynard Ferguson. The first time I heard him play completely shattered every belief I had about what the trumpet was capable of. But the second is in many ways my biggest influence. It's the man who completely redefined the role of horns in pop music, who has set the standard as both a player and an arranger. I'm of course talking about the legendary Jerry Hay. To date, Jerry has won 6 Grammy Awards for Best Instrumental Arrangements. He's been nominated for additional 15 Grammys. Jerry's even been nominated for an Oscar. Jerry's played on and done arrangements for a massive amount of multi-platinum recordings, including his iconic work on the biggest selling album of all time, Michael Jackson's Thriller. And Jerry even has credits for his kazoo playing on The Last Jedi soundtrack. Yeah, the guy can do it all. So, in celebration of International Hay Day, I just made that up, but I think it should be a legit holiday. Let's look at some of the highlights from my hangs with Jerry and also hear from some of the other trumpet gurus about the impact Jerry has had on their careers. So, let's start with the call that Jerry got in 1976 that would change his life and the state of music forever.
The first session, we had just moved to LA, and I mean, literally, it had to be 3 or 4 months, and the phone rang. Who knows how he got my phone number, but the phone rang, and it was Quincy, and he asked me to come in and play on a session. I said, great, and he says, and I want you to do the arranging too. And, okay, I guess,
Yeah.
But, we did this tune on his album called I Heard That, and the name of the song was Midnight Soul Patrol. Not really very much. It's a little instrumental ditty, and the horns are basically the intro, and every time the intro comes around, then we do a little bit on the vamp. Not a lot, but, I got my foot in the door, and he seemed to like what we did, and that was kind of how really my career got started, with the arranging part.
Once Jerry got his foot in the door, he was able to leverage that opportunity and become one of the greatest session players and arrangers of our time. So, how did Jerry hone his craft? Well, let's listen to him and find out.
Just as a player, I would go into sessions, and the writers bring these charts, and we'd play them, and one session you go in and you go, wow, this this is really good. I really like, this is good. What's going on here? Why does this sound so good? And I would make an effort to like go into the booth and go, okay, you know, that's how he voiced it, and that's what he wrote. That's how the rhythms are. The next day you go in and somebody else is writing and it's horrible. Mm-hmm. And you go, okay, why do I hate this?
Right.
Same thing. You learn what doesn't work as well. Mm-hmm. So just from the playing standpoint, I was, you know, fortunate to play with a lot of really great arrangers and, you know, kind of learn what they did that made it feel good. And then I got to play with some guys that were, it was horrible that it was, one, it was hard to play, and two, it didn't sound very good, you know? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I had that opportunity to get it from both sides, just from the playing point.
The Jerry Hay horns have an unmistakable sound, and the sound that they made them a staple in the LA recording scene. But it was backed by chemistry and a tremendous work ethic. So what does Jerry have to say about what it takes to cut it in the big leagues? Well, check this out.
If you get so lucky as to get a phone call from Quincy Jones, you got to be prepared to come in and do it right.
Right.
So you have to be prepared. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to be ready to play. You have to have the chart right. And you have to, you know, it all kind of has to come together. You know, meeting Quincy, and you have to go in there with the right attitude. And because like you said, nobody wants to work with a jerk, you know, some guy, I don't care how good he is, but you know, I just, you know, later with that, you know, there's a lot of other guys.
Yeah. Well, you've worked with so many great people. I mean, both in terms of the people that you've been contracted to work with, but even more importantly, that core nucleus of musicians that you've worked with in the horn section. People like Gary Grant and Chuck Finley, and now you're working with Wayne. Obviously, you know, other people like Bill Reichenbach and you know, just some amazing people, and it seems to stay fairly consistent. So what's the secret to being able to keep that kind of a core together?
Well, one, they have to really be able to play, and they have to be able to play the style of music that I'm going to be writing. You know, Wayne can play a lot of different styles, you know, so, you know, he has no problem coming in and, you know, playing with us. Dan Finero, another one that has been in on a few sessions. But, you know, it's just more than just the playing, because you got, like you said, you got to have somebody in there who's got the right attitude, who really wants to make it better than it should be, really. Gary Grant is the guy for that. He comes in, he'll keep playing it till he's bleeding if it's not good enough, you know, right. And that's really what it takes to make, especially back in the days when every note had to be played. There's no Pro Tools cutting and pasting and right. all that, fixing and all that. You know, we had to bust our ass to play that stuff right. Okay. And the physical demands of the trumpet, somebody's going to make a mistake, you're going to have to play it again and again and again and again. So you got to have somebody in there that's going to want to be able to do that. Yeah. And you know, hopefully each time get a little better.
During his years in Hawaii, Jerry began to develop his reputation as a world-class trumpet player. Jerry gained the attention of musicians by his onstage performances, but it was his practice room sessions that gained the attention of the local trumpet players. Let's hear from longtime friends Eric Miyashiro, Gary Grant, and Mike Chikowitz.
I remember hearing Jerry practice at the University of Hawaii practice room. I was hanging out there playing for one of those competitions, solo competitions. Yeah. And I saw a crowd gathered outside of one practice room door. They're like, you know, listening in. And I was like, oh, what's going on? So I went by and I heard this incredible trumpet playing. I think he was playing Chalier or Arbins. But just was amazing. He was like, I mean, he could do anything.
Yeah.
And I asked the guys, hey, so who's playing? And they said, well, it's Jerry Hay. And it's like, wow, okay. Who's Jerry Hay? So they proceeded to explain to me who he was, and he said that he's playing um in one of the shows, and he's got a band called the Ox,
Mm-hmm.
which later became the Sea Wind.
Right.
So I kind of tracked down Ox, try to figure I wanted to listen to him more.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out Ox was playing in one of the small theaters near Alamoana Beach. So anyway, went there and I heard the band, and oh my God, I just once again, it's like, well, that was a like religious experience
Mm-hmm.
hearing Jerry. And they also played a lot of dances, and it caught one of their dance gigs. And Jerry was the only trumpet player, and they had two other saxophones, Kim and Larry Williams.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I remember Jerry is playing everything, all the trombone parts to this, like the dance tracks, all the trumpet parts, and played a solo and played everything. And it was like, I was just, again, it's like, oh my God. So this, these OMG
Yeah. Yeah.
experiences really kind of solidified, my early on, goals
Mm-hmm.
of becoming, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
I broke into the studio scenes in LA in 1975, and of course we did. Wasn't long after that. It took me about a year to get going in LA after I moved back from Hawaii, and
Right. Yeah.
that's where I met Jerry and all the guys and Larry and all those ferocious musicians.
Yeah. All your partners in crime from back in the day. So yeah. And so I mean, Hawaii. That was some scene out there. With Jerry and that gang and yourself and from what I understand, there's just a lot of people that were kind of coming in and out of that area for various reasons. So, what did you experience out there in Hawaii besides the sun and the surf and the bikinis?
Well, I love the scuba dive, but I went over there to play with the Temptations, the Supremes, and with the same contractor that brought Jerry over there and brought Larry Williams and Larry Hall and a whole mess of people from Indiana, and they were doing the Dick Jensen show when I arrived there in Hawaii, and it was at the Outrigger Hotel, and I walked in and I heard Jerry playing this vamp. Up to double C's vamp. And it was like the 12th show that week, and I said, man, this is supposed to be out in the middle of nowhere. Where did this guy come from? So we gravitated a lot together and had a mutual interest in music, and yeah, it was fantastic.
So consequently, in high school and everything like that, and in the beginning of my time in the service, I was playing in big bands and stuff like that. Well, I got a change of duty station midway through naval career, short as it was, and I got sent to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So I was really psyched about that. But to be honest, I didn't know that I was going to be a player once I left the service. But all that changed when I got to Hawaii and I heard some guys talking about a guy named Jerry Hay, who was like this really great trumpet player on the island that I should check out and everything. And I remember going to a concert at the Waikiki Shell in 1974, I think, and it was Seawind, but they were called Ox at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and they were opening up for the CTI Jazz All Stars. That was the first time I heard Jerry. And as an opening act, it's like, 40-minute set, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I didn't really hear anything that really, said, wow, this guy is like really just amazing. But the next thing I saw him do, they opened up for Deodato. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
that.
I remember Deodato.
Yeah. Another CTI artist and everything. And they opened up for him at Andrews Amphitheater on the University of Hawaii campus. And he played some stuff that night that was like, are you kidding me? So I went up to him afterwards, and it turned out he was from Dixon, Illinois. He had studied with Charlie Geyer, who was my teacher in high school
Uh-huh.
and stuff. So we immediately kind of connected and stuff. But he was, to me, he was like, wow, this guy is like way above my level, of course. And so I started getting together with him and a guy named Larry Hall
Mm-hmm.
and Gary Grant at the University of Hawaii to practice. And it's funny because I'm writing a book about Jerry right now.
Oh, cool.
And we're working on it together and everything. And it's funny because I was asking him about those days, and he told me, yeah, we all said, man, you got this great sound and everything like that, but you couldn't get around the horn at all. It's like I couldn't play a C scale faster than 120, pretty much. So going to hook up with them and listening to what they could do was, my jaws would be sore for like 2 days from laughing.
Uh-huh.
It was so ridiculous what they could do. So that inspired me, and going to see like Ox and everything like a couple nights a week for, the whole time I was there. And then finally getting closer to all those guys and going on to gigs with them and everything. I heard Jerry doing a couple of big band things that he was working with in Hawaii and everything, that just absolutely opened my eyes as to how to play that style of music.
Mm-hmm.
So connecting with those guys actually motivated me to continue a career in playing.
Yeah.
So, and of course, those guys, when they got to LA and everything, they completely took over the town as
Yeah.
far as trumpet playing.
Yeah, completely changed the face of the use of trumpet in popular music.
Pop music, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and just such nice guys too, man. I've been fortunate
Really
enough to have Jerry on the show a couple times, and Gary, and we've gotten to develop a relationship. So that's cool stuff. It's just a lot of fun to.
I love Jerry when he says, I said, yeah, I went over and hung out with Larry Hall and talked to him about the early days and everything. And Jerry just goes, boy, that guy is such an asshole. This Larry Hall is about the nicest guy you will ever meet in your entire life. He is such a great guy, and he's got such great stories about Indiana and stuff when they were there, with Charlie Davis and
Mm-hmm.
Larry and him and a few other people and stuff. And just the hours that they put in practicing was almost unfathomable.
Yeah, it's the hours put in practicing, and then the being a part of history, basically.
Right.
So much that went on, and so many different artists that they've been able to work with over the years. It's just it's mind blowing.
Well, if you look at Jerry Hay, there's a great site out there called All Music,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically lists anybody who is on a recording. It lists kind of like the recordings that they've been on and stuff. Jerry's All Music page is like 44 pages long.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's small print too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's absurd.
Oh yeah. Well, I for years, my taste in music was driven by who was on it in terms of session players. I would look and obviously I knew anytime that it said Quincy Jones as a producer, I was probably going to want to listen to it. Because I knew that Jerry and Gary and Chuck and those guys were going to be on it.
Exactly.
And then I would just go through liner notes, and it's like, okay, if those guys are on a track, I'm buying it and I'm listening to it, even if there's only one track. But
Right. And I'll tell you, that's something that's missing nowadays. You don't get to look at a bunch of CDs or records and everything and see the personnel on it, because everything is streaming.
Yeah.
And they don't list that kind of thing if you're just downloading tunes off of iTunes or Spotify or something like that. The personnel is almost, it's like there's no inside baseball left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really thrive on that. I love those threads like you're talking about when you saw a certain producer, like if it was David Foster. Oh yeah, I'm going to check that out because it's going to be in that wheelhouse of sound that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah.
Same thing with Quincy. Arif Mardin was another guy and stuff that was really great at all that stuff. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's that, and unfortunately, that seems to be gone now.
Yeah. So to bring it back around, I mean, I use all music a lot. So anytime I'm listening, if I hear something, and like if there's a really cool trumpet solo or something on it, I mean, unless it's somebody whose sound I immediately recognize, if it's somebody like Arturo, it's like it's Arturo. You just know it. There's no getting around it. But if something else, I'm like, I wonder who that is, and I'll search for the song and look through the credits, and sometimes they have the horn section credited, sometimes they don't. So
Exactly.
but it helps you to develop that concept of sound, because if you never can identify who those players are, then you can't search for their work. And
Their other work, yeah.
And like for me, I like going back. So like with Jerry, like when I first got turned on to Jerry's stuff, then it's like, okay, well, I want to find other stuff. So I would find anything he's playing on going forward, but then I'd start to go back and listen to other things, and then that, like,
Some
okay,
of the
well,
early stuff.
yeah, then so then I go, well, then that turned me on to obviously Chuck, because Chuck was playing with it, and I'm listening to Chuck. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't realize he played with Buddy's band. So I'll go back and listen to some of that stuff, and it's like, oh, well, who's this other guy playing with him? And so it starts to open up these little wormholes, and you go in it and you find this richness. And it may not be a trumpet player, it could be like, oh, this sax player, or this, I really like this rhythm section. So it helps you to become educated about music as opposed to just listening to a tune.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's the one thing about doing this book with Jerry, is I've gotten to hear all the stories about these different sessions that they were on. As a matter of fact, the last interviewing that I did with him, we went through about, I think it was like 20 different records that were like the iconic records that he played on. And we went down almost track by track.
Oh, man.
On each of those. And he told me about how he got certain ideas for different horn lines and things like that, what the situation in the studio was and everything. And just hearing, especially, I'm one of those guys that loves to hear about the evolution of things, the beginnings of things, that small little germ from which the big tree grows and everything. And hearing some of those early stories when they first moved to LA, and when like he got his first call from Quincy and stuff, and that relationship and how it's blossomed. I mean, they are still so close and everything, even to this day. And they're really a part of each other's life in such a huge way.
Yeah.
Because what Jerry did with the horns on a lot of that stuff really did change the shape of pop music.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Well, I tell you what, when you guys get done with that book and you're ready to do your press junket, make sure you guys save some time for me, because
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe that hopefully by that time we'll be done with all of this COVID craziness, and we can just do that as a live session.
Count on that. This is going to take a while. I mean, been working on it for about 2 years now, But the thing is, it's been very sporadic because I've had things come up in my life that have caused me to take a break from it and things like that. But I'm starting to roll ahead with it, which is good.
Good
So,
deal. Good
yeah.
deal. Jerry is as humble as he is talented. Now, while most of us are quick to acknowledge his impact on the music we listen to and the instrument that we play, Jerry has been a little late to the party, but he is catching on. You've done so much. And I'm first of all, I ask you, do you ever sit back and think, wow, I've made, this huge contribution or this amount of impact to the world of music? I mean, does that ever cross your mind? What you've been able to do?
Recently with all the social media and stuff, and I've been talking to a lot of people, and I've been doing a couple interviews in South America recently, and I'm sort of getting that, I've had some impact in the music business. But, I don't really sit back and think about, other than, every once in a while, somebody will post a tune or something. Go, oh man, it's too hard. First of all, who wrote that, all of that, who are those guys? But no, it's been great. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way, meet Quincy and David Foster and Earth, Wind and Fire and Maurice White and, all those people. It's been great.
I mean, Jerry and I did some ferocious stuff together. We did. And,
Yeah.
And we took no prisoners. And I remember that a lot of times, we go in and Jerry write this arrangement, and we usually play it down the first time without stopping, just so the artist would get the gist of the thing,
Right.
And we get into the vamp, and it was holy moly vamp, and about some of the vamps were longer than the tunes,
Yeah.
and we would be going at it, and and I would be red faced, perspiration, man, just pouring off of me, just on the rundown. It's not going for recording or nothing. This is the rundown. And we get done, and I'd look at Jerry. I says, "Are you kidding me?" And he would be laughing. He would laugh so hard, man. He loved it, man. He did, man, because he could do it. He was the doer.
Yeah.
It was. I guarantee you, at the end, Jerry Hay was going to be standing. Chuck Finley was going to be standing, and I was going to be standing somewhere or another. I remember we were at the Astrodome in Houston doing the Stevie Wonder concert with Quincy, and Patty Austin had this tune, and I was playing lead on it, and on the back end, on the very end of it, it had this high G, and I really got a hold of it. I got a hold of that sucker, and I'm holding it, and right when I'm starting to say, well, you know what, I got this, baby, I'm just going to add a little more to it. And right when I did that, he's got his hands up, and he's, ladies and gentlemen, give Patty Austin a big, and he started introducing Patty. We're holding the chord.
Yeah.
And
And you're holding that G.
I'm holding that G, and I'm starting to hear guys stop playing, under me. They're running out of air. Of course, if the guy's playing a G down the lower, he's going to run out of air faster. But still, I hung in there to the bitter end, and I made it. However, it was one of the few times that my lights went out. And when it did, I leaned down and I saw Jerry's belt loop, and I hooked my finger into it to hold on. And I'm holding on, and I'm shaking like this and everything. But Jerry just took my hand and he went, bam! Man, don't be grabbing me like that up here in front of everybody. It was the funniest reaction, And man, I straightened right up. I says, okay.
My favorite arrangements that you ever did, some of the best playing and arranging, is from the Tubes Outside Inside. There's that 3 song run with Monkey Time, Wild Women of Wongo, and then Tip of My Tongue. Wild Woman of Wongo, the first time I heard that, I just about fell over. The horn solo part in there was just so amazing. Where in the world did that come from?
Uh, so, well, it's Wild Women of Wongo, so kind of anything goes,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So we got the elephant sound on the Wild Women of Wongo.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
Chuck Finley's playing trombone on that. And that was just a ferocious sound, and that particular sound in the studio, it was so loud. It was ridiculous. But the soli part, so that the band, except the drums, so it's the groove of the tune is da-da, 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 da-da. That's the groove of the tune. Okay, so the drums in that section, the rhythm sections of the guitar, bass still play da-da, da-da, da-da. Drums are playing like that. So it's
Uh-huh.
playing across the 16th notes as triplets.
Right.
So I went with that. You got to go with the drums. So you got to go with the drums. So we had this tune in Sea Wind that had this crazy, not melody, the horn solo part. That was sort of why I went there. And it's sort of a Frank Zappa moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just did it. And Foster, they all loved it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of crazy. We did there's some half, like a half speed thing in there and some back and forth.
Right.
So, yeah. But, it took us, it took 10 minutes kind of just to do that as well. Yeah.
Oh man, it stands out. Whenever I talk to someone that's not a horn player and they want some examples of what you do, that's usually one of them I pull out. Either something off of that, or obviously some of the stuff from Giro, which are, man, this is absolutely some of my favorite stuff. Actually, when Wayne and I first met, we were having a conversation over a beer about our mutual love for the work that you and Chuck and Gary did on the Giro albums. And it's like, oh my God, you have that lick off of Imagination, High Crime. So it's definitely some funky stuff.
Thank
So
you. Yeah,
all right.
we bled on that one.
I'm sure you did. Actually, I was going to ask you about this anyway, but you already brought it up about the picture of you and Jerry and Gary, because I remember one of our early hangs. We spent a great deal of time talking about our mutual admiration of Jerry's work, particularly the stuff that he did with Giro,
Oh my God,
on the
yeah.
Giro album and the High Crime album. And if you're listening to this or watching the video of this, and you're a trumpet player and you have not listened to either of those releases, stop this right now and listen to them, because that is some of the best horn arranging and some of the best playing you are ever going to hear from a commercial section.
And those are the things, that Jerry wrote that, ended up getting a lot of fame, and that were on, there were hit songs. There's many other things, that people aren't aware of, stuff with the Brothers Johnson.
Oh yeah.
And from way back when, and a lot of the things that he did for Earth, Wind and Fire, of course, and Maurice White loved Jerry Hay. When he heard Jerry Hay, it was all of a sudden like, oh my God,
This
So
is my
between Tom 84 and Jerry, I mean, two of the greatest horn arrangers of all time for pop horns, in my opinion,
Yeah.
Great, obviously James Pankow in Chicago and Greg Adams, they wrote great stuff. But Jerry Hay redefined pop horn writing from this time with Sea Wind.
Yeah.
You listen to that stuff and hear how well that works. It's never in the way of the vocal.
Yeah.
He has a way of being able to put something complicated in without it being in the way. And there's an art, there's just definitely an art to that. But there's a Polino da Costa record. It's a great percussionist in town here, man. And I'm trying to think of the name of the tune. It's maybe it's called I Love Rio. I'm spacing on the tune. And man, and the horns on that, it's the same like Giroux. It's equally as badass.
Yeah.
But I bought that, and I used to buy anything that I saw their names on.
Exactly.
I bought because their names are on. So they help sell records for the artist. I mean, Jerry is a big part of that because he influenced so many trumpet players, and that's horn section. Even though it changed its formation a little bit, the main nucleus originally was Jerry Hay and Gary Grant. Mm-hmm. and Larry or Kim Hutchcroft,
right,
was in there because and then Larry Williams and Bill Rockenbach. So you see those names, and then Chuck Finley's name started coming into play, and Steve Medeo, who was another player I didn't know really well, but I did get to play with him once. I met him a couple of times, and he was a really kind of an interesting studio player because he did weird inflections and he had some tricks with the microphone. He'd go yap, and he'd go across the microphone with his bell and these kind of weird releases And Jerry used to say that he added this other element, another color to the palette that he would fit into the thing, even though it was odd, And so he was, I wish I got to play with him more. The one session I did with him and he didn't have the chops he used to have when I played with him. He passed away now. He'd had some health issues. But the one thing I remember sitting next to him was his time, like where he placed the notes. And that's where when I sit with Jerry and Gary Grant, they know where the beat is.
Yeah.
These cats have really great internal clocks, and not every trumpet player or every musician has that.
At that point in my life, I had kind of transitioned from wanting to be Conrad Gazzo to wanting to be Jerry Hay, and Chuck Finley, those guys. So I went to LA. I had the great pleasure and fortune to do a couple of recording sessions with my father in LA, and he introduced me to those guys early on, and I wanted it so badly that I just bugged the hell out of them until they agreed to teach me, and so I was able to be around those guys, and that was most important, was just hanging out and watching what they did, seeing how it was mind-blowing. I mean, absolutely incredible. Those guys are the greatest of all time, at what they do. There's nobody better.
Man, yeah, I remember the first time I heard, like, really knew what I was listening to, and I was listening to the Jerry Hay horns. It was Off the Wall, and I just heard, and it's like, this is like nothing I've ever heard before in my life, and just I was hooked from that point on.
Me too, man. Yeah, groundbreaking. What he did and is still doing, changed the course of music. I mean, it was that important, especially for me, for guys like me and guys that like bands like Tower Power and Santa Fe, and horn stuff. There was nothing like it, and certainly he just kept upping the game every single time I heard him do something. It just, it was crazy. I'm still that. I still listen to that stuff all the time. All the time. When I drive, I put on, I'll say, play Al Jarreau or play, because that stuff is just so unbelievable. It's so great and classic. It never sounds old, never sounds tired,
We've all experienced the impact that Jerry has had on music in our lives, but who are the people that have had the greatest impact on him as a player and as a person? Let's hear it from him.
Yeah, he was, the mythical statue that you say he deserved every bit of that and more. Greatest person I've met in life. Nothing to do with the trumpet. He was just such an amazing person. Again, along with Quincy, treats everybody with respect, just great attitude, and then on top of that, a hell of a trumpet teacher. I can never say too much about him, and probably the biggest influence in my life. Well, as with Mr. Adam, he treats everybody like you want to be treated. You walk in the door and, he greets you like your long lost brother. treats everybody like that. Janitor, people getting the coffee, the second engineers, you name it. So that's a big part of why Quincy's music has got that kind of vibe to it. You go into the studio, you have a great time. There's a lot of laughs. It's always great music. And he somehow gets the best out of you, out of all the best people that he hires. You feel like you have to, live up to Quincy. And it's just, it kind of snowballs into this amazing piece of music. And he doesn't necessarily really say a lot, musically wise. But, a little word here or there, or, a suggestion of something, all of a sudden, it goes from just sounding kind of like a regular record to, now it sounds like a Quincy Jones record. What? Yeah, a lot of people, everybody says it. What happens that when Quincy comes in and walks out the door, the whole process has changed and he made everything so much better. It's crazy.
Players and arrangers have been trying to copy the Jerry Hayes sound for decades. I know that I have. But who's actually been able to catch the attention of the man himself? Let's find out.
There's a guy in England that the trumpet players in England seems to be that this younger generation of trumpet players in England that they have over there is really great. A whole bunch of really great guys over there now.
Yeah.
And one of them, Tom Walsh, is also doing some arranging and some killing arranging. Really good. He's a fan of mine. It's in my style, but it's really good stuff. So, I kind of shoot to that. He's a great trumpet player. I lend him my trumpet that I played in Sea Wind and on Off the Wall. He has that trumpet now. And he's been over to my house a few times. He played on the Giroux tribute album. He flew over here and played with Chuck and Gary on that. And just sounds the living end. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry that Mr. Adam couldn't hear you play. He's that good. It's just, yeah. So he's a really great player and he's got the arranging thing down. So, there's a possibility for him there.
Yeah.
I'm not up on a lot of the younger guys, arranging kind of guys. So I don't really know.
Yeah.
Anybody other than him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I got turned on to him thanks to your Facebook page, and I immediately reached out to him. So he'll be showing up on one of these episodes in the near future. So
did you hear that recent Nate Williams track?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, that was nuts.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
It's some great arranging, great track by Nate. Really good stuff. So that's it's in the style of me, but he's got his own little twist on it, and he can play the hell out of the trumpet.
You have worked with Jerry both professionally and also, your friendship, and you've done some studying with him as well. Jerry's a big proponent of the of Bill Adam and his concepts. And did you find that to be kind of something that helped you to clarify your approach to playing, like the mental side of trumpet playing, because that's a huge part of what Jerry does?
I think I've got to say, going to study with Jerry and Gary Grant, super. I can't really believe that the stars aligned, and I was lucky enough to do it and to know them at the time. But they were so generous with their time. But like you said, it was talking to these Zen masters of the instrument, and I've got to say that they're probably, the lessons with Jerry and Gary it's completely revolutionized the way that I play the trumpet, and some of the things that that Jerry diagnosed, and it's kind of, I was very lucky that he was in a position to kind of to want to even essentially give me the keys to the kingdom, or give. He's always been so generous with his time and his advice to everyone. I think we probably originally started messaging way back when, probably nearly 10 years ago, probably on Facebook when he joined. And it's kind of, it's surreal to think how it's come. But yeah, those guys really have, like I said, that kind of, that just the concentration that they kind of, you can just see it, like they kind of their whole face changes and their whole mindset just like engages when they've got a trumpet in front of them. And it's kind of, it must be, I think probably I did it at the right time as well. I think if someone had tried to kind of show me these kind of more refined, kind of more, mental concepts more than physical things, I probably wouldn't have had the patience maybe as a youngster to kind of understand it. But yeah, the Bill Adam routine, whilst I'm sure what I end up doing is more of an amalgam of what Jerry and some of what Gary showed me, it's what a pedagogue he was, and what a great man from all the stories I've heard. So it's certainly that mantra. And again, going to jazz college felt like it was telling me all the opposite things to what Jerry and Gary finally did, which was, I think the mantra in jazz college is not where I went, but people said, like if you're going to practice jazz language in a room, it doesn't need to sound good. Or, if you're working out ideas or harmonic ideas and it doesn't matter if you split it. Whereas the trumpet side of things, the calisthenics and the kind of rudiments, if you will, I think it's a great idea to always be making the best sound that you can at all times on the trumpet. And that just reinforces the muscle memory and the idea of your concepts, like you were saying. Those two are absolute Jedi. They're the best.
Yeah. We've got some really great guys out there, and that's also where I kind of stole this title of the Trumpet Gurus, because there's so many guys that are just like on another level in terms of their diagnostic abilities and the concepts. Like you mentioned one of my favorites earlier, Bobby Shue. Bobby is just. Yeah, he just blows your mind. He's like the trumpet Yoda. So, but guys like Jerry and Gary and Bobby and some Wayne.
Hero, absolute hero.
Yeah, he is. He's one of those dudes. But so you actually got a chance to do some recording with Jerry and the boys, and
surreal. It was back in 2014, I think it was probably, from the home studio, a strange connection, but I ended up recording on a big band record where Larry Williams, the sax player in the Seawood Horns, of course I was a huge fan of his, but he was also featured on the same track. So I just graduated, and I think I probably had a bit more get up and go then in terms of trying to make and organise live events. But we ended up getting a gig together at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club in London. It was always originally penned to be a tribute to Al Jarreau, and we were going to try and stupidly maybe try and do the Jarreau album live in concert. And so I contacted Larry to see if he wanted to be a part of it, and I had that introduction to him through this remote session. And I think I'd probably just been in touch with Jerry, or maybe just met him for the first time. And Larry was Al's MD, and so he said, well, why don't I see if Al fancies doing it? And so I was just like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. That sounds fun. And for, again, just couldn't believe my luck. Al came over and had an amazing time with us recreating that album. I think he hadn't sung some of the songs to that record for about 30 years or so. And it was surreal, and he sung incredibly. And then we did 6 shows back to back, and again had a ridiculous trumpet team that we shared the heavy lifting on. So we had my good friends Andy Greenwood and Louis Dowdeswell either side of me. So it was kind of a case of, it was fine. We swapped it around and just about got through it unscathed, I think. But after that, and of course Al passed away a few years ago now, Larry said, well, look, we're going to do a tribute record for Al. And since he had fond memories of that London concert, he said, well, do you want to come over and kind of be a part of the horn section. And then I realized, hold on, that means that I'm filling Jerry's shoes in between Chuck and Gary. So yeah, it was surreal. Truly surreal.
Yeah, man, I would have had to change my pants about 4 or 5 times during that session.
Oh wow! I mean, I don't want Jerry to know this necessarily, although he did. He let me very kindly let me stay with him for a couple of nights, so he got to hear me try and fire my chops back into working. But it was just after the New Year, and I'd just been on holiday, and probably hadn't touched the trumpet for 2 weeks, maybe for Christmas as well. Just decided it was time for a bit of a break, and so suddenly after 3 weeks off, trying to get yourself back to match fitness, that was probably a lesson. I know that Jerry's always said he never had a day off, and now I kind of see why.
Yeah. Well, the big question is, if you stayed at Jerry's place, besides giving you the tips on the horn, did he give you any tips on the wine?
Oh wow, yeah. I do you know what? It's one of those things that I've asked him since lockdown if he's been getting the good stuff out, and it's if there's anyone that uses the Vivino app, it's quite funny to kind of check out how much some of Jerry's bottles are worth. But of course, you know, like he says, he kind of got them all back at a time when it was all crazy. But yeah, I'm in my own very modest and inferior way. I am a big wine fan, definitely. But just I know what I like, but of course, like a lot of us, what I like I can't afford.
Very, very true. Like me, Jerry is a member of the F Cancer Society. While Jerry has survived his bouts, it's come at a price. Jerry is no longer able to play the trumpet as he once did. So, how does someone whose life has been built on an ability to do something that is suddenly taken away from them cope with that change? How did Jerry adjust to life off the horn? What lessons did he learn? And what advice does he want to share? What kind of advice would you be able to give just anyone, and specifically trumpet players, in how to deal with these kind of inevitable setbacks that we're going to face at some point along our career?
Yeah, well, sooner or later, everybody's not going to be first trumpet. It's where it kind of starts, and then you run into a brick wall with an injury, and who knows where that's going to end up. So some you just have to get in there and fight it out as best you can. Hopefully you come out the other end, like I think Wayne is going to, and sometimes you don't, like I didn't. I didn't make it out the other end quite as well as I was hoping to, but I'm alive. I feel great. All my test numbers and everything are great. So you can only do what you can do. And live each day as best you can. I had lymphoma in 2009, had 5 chemo treatments, and which weren't terrible, I will have to say. I could deal with them, and kept on going, and and I was still working and stuff. And then after that, they thought they got it. And in 2014, I got another lump, and it was an aggressive form of lymphoma. And I had to go down to San Diego. There were only 3 doctors in the country that deal with what I had. And I had to go down to San Diego, and I had a bone marrow transplant. And that was in 2015. And we lived in San Diego then because, you're going back and forth to the hospital daily, basically.
Right.
We lived in San Diego for 6 months, and we came home. And when we got back home, I got kind of back on a little bit of a routine. And I've always been kind of into exercising, and, I was really into running. But, the bone marrow transplant, the steroids that I had to take kind of messed with my hip so that I can't have impact on my hip because it ruined the cartilage. So I can't run anymore, but I go to the gym a lot every day when the gym is open. No, unfortunately not now, but
right.
But work wise, I did a Dave Matthews band record. Rashawn Ross, who is a good friend and a hell of a player and great guy, he talked me into doing some arranging, and he actually came down to San Diego to the apartment we were staying in, and we worked on some arrangements together. And that was the first thing that I did when we came back here after 6 months down in San Diego, was Dave Matthews. And then from that point on, I just kind of went back into regular routine. Anybody wants me to do any arranging, no problem. I haven't been playing for, 10 years now at least. And, I miss that, but, time marches on.
Yeah.
But, today things are great. I had a checkup last Friday. Everything is 100%. So
that's
I
that's
can't
awesome.
ask for anything more.
Yeah.
But it does make you take a look at, where you are and how much longer you have around, and, the family and all that.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was, my issues started in the mid 80s, really. I had a tumor on my throat. And so that was kind of the beginning of a time that I had to do a really deep search, into, what's going to happen next. So, I decided to buckle down and say, okay, I'm going to play trumpet. I'm going to practice 10 hours a day, and I'm going to be so physically good that I can get over any of the other circumstances that I did. So, I did that for a while. I did that for 3 or 4 years, just serious practicing and serious physical exercise and eating really well. I was in seriously great shape in mid to late 80s. And I was able to overcome any physical problems that the tumor was causing. But then it got to the point that you can only do that so long without really killing yourself. And, I took a look at it. It basically came down to Quincy for me again, as amazing as that is. Quincy had a double aneurysm when he was 41 or something like that.
Oh my God.
And, he played trumpet. And, I said, okay, Quincy doesn't play trumpet anymore. He's doing okay. I can do okay if I don't play trumpet like I used to play trumpet. I can, and because of Quincy, he got me on the arranging thing, and look where that led. I would have never done that would it not have been for, Seawind, Quincy.
Right.
So, you have to take what's given to you. If a door opens and that one door kind of on its way closed, and you got to walk through another door.
Yeah.
And thank God for the pencil, because that's that's made it for me, really.
Thanks for joining me for this special episode. I'll be doing more of these retrospectives in the future. And if you have an idea for a concept show, hit me up, because as much as I wanted you to believe that this is all for me, it's not. It's for all of us. So, as always, peace and slide grease. We out. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see the hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors, and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Gurus Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.